The UAA committee is a significant committee of NASBA and the AICPA. And it is one of the few committees where we have a joint group from each organization. And it is unique in the 11-12 year in that Steve McConnell, who chairs the AICPA side, when I first went on, our little marker's not, there, nope, won't see it. But anyway, when I first went on the committee, I was on the AICPA side. McConnell was the chair for NASBA. And I still remember having a motion on the floor at a meeting in New Orleans, and Steve wasn't totally in favor of the motion, but he knew I had a second. He also knew I had the votes. He said, I got to go to the airplane, and meeting adjourned. So that took care of that. And so now it's worked around that he's now the chair on the AICPA side, and I chair the NASBA side, and it really has made, our prior experience has made for an excellent working relationship. We usually talk 6 o'clock my time, for his time on Sundays, and whatever issues we got going on, we get that worked out. So that's really been great, and you can see who the committee members are, and if some of them are here, if you're here, stand up. I see Barton, that Barton is head of the task force on independence. Anybody else? Dwight is here. Yep, there you go. And Nancy from the AICPA, Dwight from NASBA, Kevin from the AICPA. All right. So then the AICPA committee is a evergreen. The document itself is an evergreen document. The committee will always have issues to address. When Lori Tisch was the prior chair for NASBA, Kevin Currier was the prior chair for the AICPA. Seems like they dealt with the firm name issue for a period of 2 years. And during that period, we collected a number of other issues that need to be looked at. So the retired inactive CPAs, the definition of a test, confidentiality and whistleblowing, the definition of independence, and registration of foreign auditors, which raised its head in the 011 and 012, and then acts discreditable. And the acts discreditable came from Nathan Garrett's presentation at the annual meeting, and he asked the committee to look at the language in the professional standards for acts discreditable, and was there enough language in there where the boards could take action against a registrant if they committed an act that was discreditable. So that's where that came from. And the committee itself doesn't generate these concepts that come up. It's actually we get these issues from other committees. So that's just so that you're aware of that. We don't particularly come up with those. So they get handed to us and we deal with them, all right? Now, so on the retired inactive CPAs, basically in looking at that, we have there's 6 task forces. Steve and I broke the committee down into 6 task forces so we could get all these issues dealt with and could have 1 to 2 face-to-face meetings and make recommendations, then be ready to go to the NASBA board, which meets the last weekend in July, and the AICPA board, which meets the first week in August, with any recommendations that we have regarding the UAA and or the rules. And basically, the act itself is a combination of the UAA, AICPA, and NASBA committee. The rules are basically the responsibility of NASBA. And so even though those rules are the responsibility of NASBA, I said to Steve, I said, look, even though that's ours, I think it's good to have input from the AICPA side and the recommendations. So the AICPA side is involved in the discussions of whether or not a proposed rule should be put forth to the respective boards, but it's really the NASBA board that votes to adopt the rules. So on the retired inactive CPAs, the task force determined, and the committee accepted that at a recent meeting in DC, that the description that is in the current UAA is adequate, except that we should move from the term retired to the term inactive throughout the UAA. That it was more descriptive of the status of a CPA. So and so we will be making that recommendation to the NASBA board. Then definition of a test. You may remember that the definition of a test basically includes the SASs, the SARs, then one attestation standard that deals with the pro forma financial statements of an entity, and there is an opinion that is issued under that attestation standard, and that's SSAE 3, I believe. Somebody will say no, it's a different one, but I think it is 3 as I recall. But anyway, so that's the only attestation standard that is referred to in the current definition of a test, and then you have the PCAOB reports are also referred to. So, does that definition need to be expanded? Well, the committee believes that it does, and because we now have 16 attestation standards, all right? And some of those standards actually came from the SASs and were put over into the attestation standards, and the latest one being attestation standard number 16, which relates when SAS 70 was bifurcated and to make the report on the entity of an entity's IT control environment, to make that an attestation standard. Well, when we did that, the public is used to that standard being a service that is issued or provided by CPAs and reserved to CPAs. But when you put something over in the attestation standards, it's not in the definition of a test, except for that one attestation standard on pro forma financials. So therefore, you got 15 attestation standards out there that are basically left open for anyone in the general public to perform, and the Act does not preclude anyone in the general public from performing those acts. So there's a lot going on with the definition of a test. We've got members here of that task force from the AICPA and from NASBA, and the AICPA is currently drafting a white paper for the task force to look at, and because we do not want any unintended consequences to appear in developing this final definition of a test, and should it be expanded. So we definitely know there's going to be some changes. We just don't know what those changes are yet. And so as soon as we get the white paper, and we're supposed to have that in August, the task force on the AICPA side, led by Ed Jolliker, will be moving rapidly. So we would like to hopefully, I'd like to bring this to a close by the time we have our annual meeting in late October, but that's probably wishful thinking, to tell you the truth. Then confidentiality and whistleblowing. The group is in general agreement, particularly on confidentiality. What is confidential, and are the current standards in various state statutes adequate? what we have in the UAA, is that adequate? And basically, we are in general agreement, except for there's one difference, and on the AICPA side, their literature states that the records don't have to be returned, that even though the product, like a report or a tax return, has been delivered, if the fee hasn't been paid. Then from the NASBA viewpoint, the thought process is that if the product's been delivered, then all of the client records should be returned. So we're working out that difference, and then we will have, and as of yesterday, I got information from the task force chair on the NASBA side, so the task force has got to deal with that, and Noel Allen for NASBA and Virgil Webb for the AICPA are trying to work out the differences. So we will we'll have a recommendation for both boards, and then on whistleblowing, that is a complex issue. The two attorneys are involved with that, as well as the task force, and we're trying to come up with some recommendations for that. Particularly, you know, when a registrant is rewarded by the IRS for turning in an employer or someone else, and should that, you know, should that registrant be protected? And there was one state particularly where a registrant did do that and was not protected, even though the registrant did the right thing, the way in which the statute read. The registrant had to be disciplined. So we are in the process of trying to work that out. The definition of independence, and that was handed to us by one of the committees from Peak, and and basically the recommendation is not to have a different definition in the UAA, but to draft a rule to conform the current definition of independence to more closely agree with other authoritative bodies. You got the AICPA, you got the International Accountants, IFAC, who also have a definition of independence. Then you have the GAO, who's got a definition of independence, and you also have the SEC, the AICPA, the international group use the terms independent, independent of mind, independence of mind, state of mind, and whereas with the SEC they use independence in fact, which is what a lot of us have grown up with. You know, so should we change that? Should we use independence in fact? I think the general agreement among the group, among the task force, is that we should conform that definition to as closely as we can to other authoritative bodies. So that's the only difference that we have to work out. And right now, the task force is leaning toward independence, state of mind, rather than in fact. So we'll see how that comes out. Then registration of foreign auditors. We know more about that than we'd ever want to know. There's been a lot of work gone into this, trust me. And because the whole issue is, you have to be really careful with this, because mobility is involved, and you don't want to draft some rules or changes to what we call 14J in the Uniform Accountancy Act, which basically says that if you have a foreign accounting firm performing work for a foreign entity in the U.S., then the accounting firm does not have to be registered because it's performing work for the foreign entity. Well, we now have accounting firms that are coming from China, Russia, the Middle East, that are auditing financial statements, which are submitted to the SEC. The SEC is accepting those the financial statements in an offering, and even though the PCAOB may not be allowed to perform an inspection of accounting firms in the country in which that firm is located. So we have got to work, we are working through this issue, and we developed this thought group to try to frame the problem. And as of this week, we are again, we're still framing that problem. We got the problem framed. We now need to go meet with the SEC, and the leadership of NASBA and the leadership of the AICPA are trying to arrange a meeting with the SEC and also with the PCAOB to see if we can get this worked out so that the form changes, so that the principal executive office definition relates, what relates to what we have in the UAA, which is called the home office. So we have that, those two definitions are in conflict with one another. And what we don't want, from a NASBA point of view, what we don't want to happen is that if an accounting firm is, if a U.S. office, an office within the U.S. is listed on the 10K where it says principal executive office, we do not want a member of the public to interpret that to mean that the accounting firm that signed off on those financial statements is subject to the regulation of a state board. And you could have that interpretation, and we do have some evidence that has happened. So we've got, the SEC does have some language already that if it would enforce, would solve that problem. But we've got to have this chit chat with the SEC and involve the PCAOB at the same time, because the foreign firms can be registered with the PCAOB, but not registered with any of our 55 jurisdictions. So we've got to get this worked out and to see what the SEC will do to enforce its own rules and regs that it currently has. Then we have some alternative thought processes that we would more than likely write into the rules. But there's a lot of work to be done with this, and it won't be done by November, I don't believe. So, acts discreditable. This came about as a result, as I mentioned earlier, of Nathan Garrett's presentation at the annual meeting in 2011. We did look at that. The task force looked at it. The two chairs looked at it, and we believe that there's adequate language that in the current professional standards to cover this, and we don't have to have any changes to the UAA or the rules. Now, there may be a recommendation that to the boards that the boards have a statement in their statute or in their rules to link to the professional standards as promulgated by the AICPA, but the language that's there is sufficient. So with that, I would take any questions. May not have any answers, but anybody's got a question about what we're doing? Okay, thank you very much.